Hey everyone, it's great to see you again. In previous videos, I've talked about age discrimination and how it's often a perception that is created before a hiring manager ever meets you. In other words, they're forming an opinion in their mind, and they've made this opinion well before they've ever met you. And I think there was a study done by the Chronicle. It wasn't done by the Chronicle. It was reported in the Chronicle in 2017. It was one of the largest studies that was ever done on age discrimination and the resumes out there. And so what they did, and this was really fascinating, is they sent some 40,000 fake resumes to a little over 13,000 job openings. The resumes were identical except in gender, and also what they had done is they had listed a date of graduation on the resume for a high school attendance. So in other words, these were lower level skilled jobs, but I think there's still a lot of information that we can gain out of this because, again, it was the largest study of its kind. And so they had three different age groups. They had an age group that was 29 through 31. There was another age group that was 49 through 51. And then there was an age group of 64 through, and then just plus and move up from there. And what they found is that as they went up the ladder in ages, remember, the resumes were identical with a couple of exceptions. One, the gender, and also the date of graduation on the resumes. And what they found was that as they went up the ladder in ages, there was significant less callback. And also in this study, it was men that were called back more so than women, even as they went up the chain. So, can't really do anything about the gender, but we can certainly do something about age. So, on the resume. So I want you to understand something. If you're an older worker and somebody in mid to late career, and I'm really kind of defining this as 50 and over, okay? So, hey, I'm 60. I don't consider myself old. I didn't consider myself old at 50, but let's be realistic there that the perception of an older worker can go down as we we age. At least the perception. This is something that's being formed in the mind before you even walk in to the interview. One of the things that you need to remember is you don't really have to go back more than 10, definitely no more than 15 years when it comes to dates on a resume. So what you want to do is if you have earlier work that is relevant out there and you want to put it on a resume, but it's like, 15, 20, 25, 30 years ago, then what I want you to do is I want you to put this work under something called additional work experience. So, for example, here's a copy of my resume. This is actually my resume where you see additional work experience there. I have the FDIC, I had a savings and loan. But you know what? I also had a lot of other savings and loans that I worked at, that I managed, that I actually grew up in that kind of industry. There was positions that I held between savings and loans and the FDIC that are not listed on there. Number one, they really weren't relevant. But when you have something with additional work experience, the key is you're not putting dates on there. And if you're not putting dates on there, you're not having to worry about showing gaps of employment, so you can get away with this. So that's one tip there. There's more. So it's just, let me give you something that was very common 15 years ago, 20 years ago, was having a job objective listed at the top of the resume. But that dates yourself right now, because today current resumes start with a professional profile. It's like your little sales brochure, your little sales statement of who you are and what industries that you've worked in, what are your skills, and you're putting this in 3 to 4 sentences. References available on request. Again, something that you used to see all the time on resumes, but you don't see that anymore. But if somebody was looking at the resume and they saw that, they could probably assume that the owner of this resume is going to be an older worker. terminology that might be used, especially in some of those earlier jobs. Words like, oh, I was, an expertise in CTR or design, or CRT design out there, Nobel experience. I mean, things that can really super date you. That you're bringing to highlight in some of these earlier positions, but even things as simple as an email address. When I see an AOL email address before I even talk with a person, I already know that they're going to be an older worker. Just a simple AOL address could date you. So you want to go out there and get a more current one, use, Gmail and pick up a free Gmail. The main thing with getting a new email address is make sure that you're representing yourself efficiently, or professionally. So there's a number of things that you can do with your resume that essentially shields yourself from age discrimination. And that's the big thing, because again, once you go into the door, it's more about it. So keep in mind, your resume is what's validating your competence. The phone screen is what's validating your competence. You're not going to sound old on the phone, your voice. But once you go into the interview, it becomes more about compatibility and likability than it does about competence. Otherwise, they would never have called you in. And I have some videos on that as well that I'll go ahead and link in the upper right-hand corner. So I hope you found this video informative and useful. And if so, if you haven't already subscribed to this channel, make sure that you do so. Hit the bell notification. That way you're not going to miss anything moving forward, as I do upload new career tips and strategies every Tuesday. Thanks for stopping by, and I look forward to seeing you next week as well. Bye-bye.